Well, how we doing, everyone? Merry Christmas. Tommy Grisafi, Ag Bull Media, Ag Bull Trading. You're listening to the Ag Bull Podcast. We have Mr. Jim Wiesemeyer waiting. We have a lot to talk about. We have some breaking news on cattle on feed. Of course, as you're learning now, this video is going to be released every Saturday at 6 a.m. Central Time. That way, we're on a little pattern here. Regardless if we film on Friday or Saturday, you're getting a fresh video. And of course, someone didn't shut off their phone. But we'll get right back to that. So at least you know this isn't edited. Mr. Wiesmeyer's waiting. We have breaking news. He has a lot of things he wants to talk about. Although it's felt like the markets were calming down, they had some real big moves in various times of the week. We'll talk about all that. But from the bottom of my heart, I'm sure Jim says the same. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Agriculture and the folks working in it are the hardest people working in America. We'll bring Jim in. Happy Friday. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's the holiday spirit here in D.C. President Trump gave the government workers off both the day before and the day after Christmas. So he's in the spirit, and I'm ready to drink my spiked eggnog as close to Christmas as I can.
All right, let's check our mics. Just double check that. Oh, yeah, we are live. A lot of stuff going on. Every week's different, and so many weeks have so much drama. I feel like there was no drama this week. That is the furthest from the truth. It was just like a little calmer. I mean, we could talk about a lot of different things, but I know we want to talk about markets right off the bat. Cattle had a nice comeback, but they also had some down days. Feeder cattle closed up $5. Live cattle were up a little, and hogs were down. Soybeans, if you're a farmer or anyone involved in markets, you have to be disappointed. Soybeans down 27 cents. I think you said, Jim,
7-week lows. 7-week lows.
7-week lows.
Yeah.
That's bad. Corn up 3. We have some optimism. Wheat down 17. So a mixed bag. But boy, I didn't have time to pop a cattle chart up, but we are halfway back and filling in gaps and hitting all types of Fibonacci numbers. With that, we did have cattle on feed, Jim, and as best I can tell, talking to a few friends in the industry, they said, I quote, looks like placements were lower than expected. Otherwise, the rest in line. Now, you had some perspectives on that.
But it still shows the tightness in that supply, and that's obvious. That's why we're going up in feeder cattle and cattle to a degree. But put the perspective that Sean Haney from
I'm going to read this to you, Jim.
Yeah, read
in
this.
small print, okay? Up until the end of September, Canada imported 294,000 head of feeder cattle. This is 20% ahead of the, whoopsie, it popped off on our new thing, on our 10-second thing. It's ahead of 2024 pace. 2024 was a record year of 400,000 for the year, so Canada should break a record.
And that's adding to the tightness of the supply here. We shouldn't tell President Trump this because we don't want him to close the border, Tommy.
No, we're going to have some news about the border here in a little bit. Did you want to talk about screwworm? Did you want to do?
Screwworm. That's what we're going to talk about, the eventual reopening of the U.S.-Mexico border for that screwworm. I think we have a graphic on the screwworm. Subject to change. Here's what my best sources are telling me, Tommy. Bear with me a little bit.
Sure.
When they do announce, and it could be yet this year, they'll announce, officially a science-based, phased-in reopening of the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, the way I understand it, again, subject to change, there's going to be 4 inspection tests, 3 in Mexico and 1 in the United States, before those cattle are allowed from Mexico to go forth within the United States. Now, the way that is they're going to first seek an area that's relatively safe in Mexico to begin the phased in. Okay. Then the cattle, I'm not hearing a number, the cattle that are going to come in initially will all be tested Now, if any of those cattle test positive for screwworm, they will still go along to the second Mexico testing site, but they're going to be given a treatment in order to make sure they no longer have screwworm, the sores, etc. Now, in the second Mexico site that will eventually be identified, the same thing's going to happen. Those cattle are going to be retested. And if any cattle test negative, positive, at that juncture, they go back into Mexico. They stay in Mexico in the case, okay? But then the remaining cattle go into another separate Mexican testing site. And again, the same process. If they're if they test negative, they will go on to a U.S. site yet to be announced, and then they're going to be tested again. And it's that portion of cattle that pass all four, well, within reason, 4 tests, who are tested 4 times. The first one's different because they can treat the cattle first into the second. Those are the cattle that's going to be allowed into the United States. Now, this could change, but this is the best information I have at this particular time. What it tells me, Tommy, and you're the trader, this is going to be pretty drawn out, phased in, because it's going to take some time to go through all these testing.
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of? Remember in the movie The Godfather when he comes over from Italy and Ellis Island, and they put him over here and they send him to this doctor, and then they put a mark on him, and then he had to stay in quarantine for like a month, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to let some cattle in, but it is going to be a very, in review, as best I could tell from understanding you, it's going to be a slow, methodical, thought out process. They're not just going to open the doors and be like a concert and say, go pick your seat, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be very slow. So I did a video this week with Mike Sands, and we went over the cattle numbers. And back in the day, we were letting in 1,200,000 cattle from Mexico.
Yes.
This year, we only let in 200,000. And so it sounds like if they open, sure, could we let in 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 over next year? Yeah, but it's going to, the supplies are so tight.
Yeah.
Jim, I mean, we could have a winter storm. If
Yeah.
we had a heck of a winter storm this year, we could kill a few 100,000 cattle. So
that's why cattle should remain firm in 2026, right? If not longer.
That was Mike Sands' point. Yeah, he was. He said the numbers don't lie. Now, who's going to tell President Trump that he was not able to? There's a 2-year cycle to make cattle that he couldn't get that done. Who's going to break the news to him?
This is not eggs, and I think we have some beef prices, some graphics here that that shows. Look at that consumer beef price. This came from the consumer price index. It shows you the average per pound for uncooked ground beef, and look at that. That's fairly lofty, and that's not going to change all that much because of what we keep saying, tight supply, and the demand is holding up really, really at a good pace.
Yeah,
and
you brought another chart too, Mr. Wiesemeyer. These are a little hard to see, but do you remember what this is?
I'd have to see. Oh, that's the different categories on the consumer price index, and you can see food and energy, et cetera. Look at energy up there. It's not gasoline prices. That's electricity prices. So Trump mentioned that in his White House address this week, and he's going to try whatever he can, permitting and other things to bring down those electricity prices. It was like a State of the Union address, but it shows you how he's going to become more aggressive in talking to the American people going into the 2026 elections. He knows, Tommy, that we have to go from the gains in Wall Street with the equity markets to Main Street, and that's going to be a harder street to travel. What with the interest rates, what with electricity prices, insurance prices, housing affordability, etc. But he addressed all those. I think he was a bit he yelled more than usual, but I give it overall a B or a B. It wasn't an A.
Okay.
It wasn't an A, but he went through the topics that he had to. in 20 minutes. I didn't think I'd ever hear a Trump speech be only 20 minutes, but he did it.
That's very interesting. So we have our cattle moving that way. We're going to, let's see here. Next, this is the every week we talk about this. China soybean purchases from the U.S. This is the story that just keeps giving here.
Yeah, and although USDA isn't at the official 7.5 to 8 million tons that many in the trade are at, Bloomberg had a story that total Chinese purchases of U.S. soybeans are at about the 7 million mark. And recall that by the end of February or this season, I really think it's by the end of the marketing year, China is committed to purchase 12 million metric tons. So they're well on the way, despite all the early errant conjecture by some, not all, some in the grain industry that said either China wouldn't buy hardly anything or they wouldn't live up to the 12 million metric tons. They're well out, they're over half of the way there, Tommy. That's the bottom line. And they're holding auctions. Now, the latest one, the soybean auction, to free up the space in China because they're loaded up with beans. They're taking approaches in order to find the storage to import all these soybeans. But bottom line, I'd rather have a slower approach of imports of China importing soybeans than nothing. You know, that they had not, they weren't importing anything. So it's a step in the right direction, but we have to be competitive. Now, here's the thing I want the audience to understand. U.S. soybeans will become very competitive to China versus Brazil because we're now at least $1.20 higher than Brazilian beans. If Trump takes off the additional 10% tariffs that he put on China relative to fentanyl, and I think that's not a question of if, but when. It could be months from now, but I think eventually it's going to happen. And if China returns the favor, bottom line, we are very competitive to Brazilian beans at that juncture. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, that's a positive development for the competitiveness of U.S. soybeans, especially going to China.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to grab the next headline. I'm going to mute you. I'm going to mute your mic. You go ahead and grab a little bit of eggnog in your favorite drink. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I can hear Mr. Wiesemeyer's voice struggling. He must have been yelling at people this week. All right. Tommy Grisapi here, Jim Wiesemeyer. Our next subject is U.S. core inflation eases to slowest since 2021. And we have a headline of that. Inflation data. Now, with that, I'll bring Mr. Wiesemeyer back in. I think he's had a little swig of eggnog. I'll turn his mic on. Jim, you were sounding like you were struggling. Yeah. And I said, hey, you didn't see it, but when we started the show, I had a huge sneeze and I reached over and hit my mute button before I dirtied my microphone. So we're on the struggle bus today, but you know what? I am so excited to be doing this with you. And we had a lot of positive comments and reviews, texts from friends. My friend Connor texted me, said, you know, who's watching your show? And so we have thousands of viewers every week, but only a few reach out. If you're enjoying the show, say hi. Of course, at the bottom, I have how to sign up for Mr. Wiesemeyer's newsletter. We'll get that right in there. And there's that email there. So while we're doing ads and commercials, heck, I'll just keep going.
And we try to add perspective, Tommy. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, we do. Now, Mr. Wiesemeyer and I, we have a way to pay for this, so you don't have to. But if you want other content, like I did that video with Mr. Mike Sands on cattle and all these other people I'm meeting with, $25 a month, $250 annually, www.agbull. You'll see, folks, at the beginning of the year, you're not seeing a lot of content from me coming out. It's because it's behind the paywall. But Mr. Wiesemeyer and I, we just keep doing that. So let's start over here that we have U.S. inflation. Yeah, we have the CPI chart.
It was the lowest in years. And now some of the naysayers were quick to, who didn't forecast that the numbers were going to show what they did. They thought that we would have more core inflation and more overall CPI, but they were wrong. But now they immediately said, well, this data is a little tempered because this was the government shutdown. We didn't get the volume of returns, etc. So it could be January, February CPI CPI reports and the job numbers report before we see whether or not these numbers are indeed happening. I think they are. I think we're having a deceleration, deflation, if you will,
Hmm.
in more than a few products. Now, food is sticky, as we keep saying.
Sure.
I think the food was up 2.6% or so. And that was a result of beef and some other products, but at least it's not as high as it was during the last 2 years. Bottom line, I think the market next year, Tommy, is going to shift from inflation into the job number, unemployment rate, because the unemployment rate went up to 4.6%
Okay.
recently. That's the Fed doesn't like
Mm-mm.
4.6%. So what's that mean? The Federal Reserve, I think, will eventually get where the private market is at relative to additional 25 basis points cuts in the Fed funds rate beginning probably January next year. We have to see what some additional numbers are going to show. But if that unemployment sticks at 4.6% and inflation continues to go at least down in certain areas, housing, shelter, if you will,
Hmm.
food, et cetera. And remember, energy reduction, we've got gasoline prices, maybe not as low as Trump said on television this week, but they're lower. I mean, I was
Yeah.
in Nebraska, what was it, a week or so ago, and I saw 245
Yep.
for regular gasoline, and I think it's even lower than that. That's like a tax cut,
Yeah.
Tommy.
Can I add some color to that? This
Sure.
is so stupid. I got to tell you. I on our little service we have at Nesvik, they were talking about gas prices coming down. Do you know gas stations are reporting a surge in sales in Slim Jims and other products inside the gas station? Because when someone goes to fill up, they're only spending $40 instead of 70. They're
Yeah.
going in, they're going to the washroom like everyone does at the gas station. Most of these washrooms are not nothing you'd be proud of at your own house. But if a guy's got to go, he's got to go. But they're picking up a Slim Jim. They're getting an energy drink, maybe a can of Zins. Who the heck knows? But that's what happens when you get the price of a raw ingredient like that gas down. It gives the consumer money to spend on something else. I thought I'd add that tidbit because it's tossed around the
Absolutely, and
office.
that
Go ahead.
turns that money over. Also, there's maybe you can put a link on it. I
Hmm.
had a link into the rise of beef jerky. The guy who really got the industry going. It's a really fascinating story to read. That
That's
was
what
in
they were talking about at work. Yeah.
Forbes magazine. I put a link to
Okay.
it in my updates, but it's really good reading because that's true American. He went in years ago to, I get maybe a service station, and saw how expensive beef jerky was. And he had happened to be in a family that owned a beef processing plant, and it went under. He went bankrupt. But he said, I've got facilities here to
Hmm.
make beef jerky, ovens, if you will. And he started it, and now he's a billionaire. So
That's
that's
an
that's
American
America
story
101
right
to
there.
me. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Let's stick with the theme here. What is still missing from USDA outlook for U.S. agriculture trade and food price, Jim?
Well, we had the overall trade deficit that narrowed as a result of these tariffs, but we really didn't have USDA's follow up. I'm being told now it goes off and on, but December the 23rd, we're going to have that outlook for U.S. agricultural trade from USDA. The key there, Tommy, is whether or
Mhm.
not USDA is going to add any commentary in it, because the last few reports, they've just had the tables, the numbers, if you will. But
Yeah.
see, with the Trump tariffs, some of the story is not it's not so positive. So we're going to see. That's how I'm going to judge whether or not we're getting back to normal, if there's actual written analysis, if you will, of the trade numbers for USDA. I hope that's going to be the case.
And
December the 23rd.
that headline didn't have a chart. This total aid funding, is that coming down all the pointers on the total aid funding when that's down the road a little bit, right? When we talk about SD, that's getting confusing.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot to say on that. Is that
Okay.
next?
Well, I was just making sure I wasn't supposed to pop it up. People are going to be watching this. They're going to say those two were off. Like, well, if you've seen how much Jim's been traveling and how much he's been working and everything else, you'd understand. FBA payment rates supposed to come in next week.
Yeah, that's the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. I
Hmm.
think today at 5 o'clock. Yeah, pretty soon. It was the deadline for having your acreage information in, and during the week of December 22nd, that's next week,
Hmm.
they're going to announce the payment rates. Now, we've got a couple from Farm Doc
Yeah.
and my good
Who do you
friend
want
Paul
first,
Neefer.
Mr. Neefer? I'm going to read Mr. Neefer's. They're small
Okay,
print, folks, and I know a lot of you are listening to this on the Vocal podcast. Here we go.
say the estimated per EPA payment per acre.
Yep. And I'll tell you the commodity. Let's go with corn, $46, soybean, 32, wheat, 34, cotton, 100, rice, 116, peanuts, 88, sorghum, 42, oats, 80, barley, 24. That is from Mr. Paul Neefer, the Farm CPA. And we do have a Farm Doc one that has very, very similar numbers. Looks like maybe rice is a little higher, but they're all within a couple dollars. Add some color to that, Jim.
Well, now remember, there's going to be a factor in these payments because they got to make sure they fall within that $11 billion for these payments for
Okay.
row crop producers, Tommy. So, and then they'll always have a top up if they don't overspend. So, but the interesting thing on those payment rates in both Paul Neefer's and Farm Doc, that's University of Illinois primarily,
Hmm.
soybeans is relatively low. Now, if you recall, they're using the December WASDE, and we had that run up, what, $1.50
Yep.
in soybeans. And even though the current, I feel for the soybean growers because as we said, they're at 7 week lows and they were down 27 and a
Cents.
half
Yeah.
cents this week. So
That's a kick in the pants.
yeah,
And
there,
Jim,
although 60% or more of people who grow soybeans also grow corn. So
mhm,
they're going to get it one way or the other. But I think the soybean payment is too low
very weak.
from the herd
Mhm.
out there in soybean country.
Can I add to that also? There's no basis in that. So if you're in North Dakota and you got an ass kicking of $1 basis, there's no money for basis. That's just a flat price, as if everyone sells soybeans at the border trade price. And that's not how the world works, Jim. And that's what happens when government gets involved in these things. They can't get to the little details that
No,
everyone knows is common sense, but there's not enough spreadsheets in the world to give a payment based
no.
on basis,
And
correct?
I agree. They want it quick and easy. And note that they'll make the payments no later than the end of February. So that's a pretty good time. That's a pretty fast timeline for USDA to get this out, to get the payment rates announced next week,
Hmm.
sometime next week, and to have the checks probably go right into the bank accounts by no later than February the 28th. And that's cash flow. That's needed cash flow. Now, we had an official, Richard Fordyce from
Hmm.
FCAP and USDA, FSA, et cetera, come out the last few days and say, this is it from USDA, where we have a money crunch here, a funding crunch. To me, that was a signal to Congress, to farm state lawmakers. If you want additional aid, which I think they want, it's going to
Hmm.
have to come from Congress. And we had House Ag Committee Chairman G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania and Senator Bozeman, who you mentioned before, from Arkansas. There's G.T. Thompson and Bozeman from Arkansas, the Senate Ag Committee Chairman. They are both saying the need is there, and they're asking USDA officials, how much additional farmer aid do you think is needed out there that you can't provide? So they're going to want to put it in a must-pass bill, probably in January, Tommy. So we're going to watch that. We'll monitor it each week on
Hmm.
this program as far as the odds of it coming through, because it could get, as usual, tied in with all sorts of politics. But the need is there for sure.
100%. 45Z provisions.
That's the one where the Treasury finally sent over to the Office of Management and Budget the information for 2025 tax issues. So we're starting to see some progress on getting some details out there, and some analysis from the University of Illinois. Scott Irwin, I think, was his name, and we had this in my updates earlier in the week, Tuesday or Wednesday this week. He put some not bad payments for producers. Let's bottom line on that, Tommy. We need domestic utilization of U.S. soybeans and corn to get us into that next gear up on prices, to get us above the cost of production and truly profitable prices. The programs like the Renewable Fuel Standard Program, RFS, the biodiesel program, the renewable diesel program, and the 45Z, which is sustainable aviation fuel, carbon sequestration, that's more like 45Q program. But we need the details for 2026 forward. All they are going to announce any day now are the details for 2025. So the market still needs some of these details, but I'm not going to be negative on this. Once we get the details, we can pencil out how much of an incentive this will be, not only for the throughput industries, the processors, et cetera, for the great agriculture system, but also individual producers, soybeans and corn primarily. So we're getting closer to getting information that we can do some analysis, but this could be a pretty good shot in the arm next year.
And you touched on RFS plans, right?
Yes, they're going to come out. We had this months ago, Tommy, and the market first got reports this week. Sometimes we're pretty early on this stuff. We said it would be sometime in early 2026 when the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, would release details on the mandates for 2026 and 2027. They call them RVOs. They're really mandates of how much corn.
This gentleman's
biodiesel,
involved, right?
yes,
Mr.
Lee
Lee Zeldin.
And they're just so busy on, I guess, other things. I really think it should be out now so people can plan, but it is what it is. And we're going to know. And also on the remember the reallocation. We're going to see the reallocation of those SREs that they gave some waivers to. That's why EPA wants them to announce both of these together. The mandates for 2026 and 27 and the allocation factor of how it's going to affect those waivers and how many are going to be reallocated. So we're going to have a lot of news come out early in 2026 that's going to affect the markets and the business of agriculture, and we'll monitor it.
Absolutely. This is on everyone's mind. ACA, Obamacare subsidy loss could hit farmers, but early 2026. I've heard more talk about the cost of healthcare in the last few weeks from individual family and friends than I've heard in the prior 5 years. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, they're seeing a lot of farmers are a participant in Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, which is what Republicans call it, the Unaffordable Care Act, because of all the huge incentives that have to be paid to make it a viable program. And this is where President Trump and key Republican leaders are saying, wait, we need to reform. Let's get and watch Trump. He's going to come after the insurance companies big time because those companies have been the biggest beneficiaries of the Obamacare and Affordable Care Act, billions and billions of dollars. And Trump is right there. The program needs to be reformed. Now, what the House and Senate did, the House passed a bill, but it's not going to be the final bill, Tommy. Bottom line, when Congress comes back in January, I fully expect a bipartisan agreement, it won't be easy, will be had to some sort of an extension, 1 year, 2 years, etc., for the Obamacare and Affordable Care Act. Maybe not, maybe including the enhanced incentives, but it's going to come with some reforms, payment limits, etc. Maybe a movement more to where some of these insurance companies won't have all those lucrative avenues to go under that program. But The reason it's important for Republicans is that if something doesn't happen, more than a few rural citizens subscribe to Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. When you think about it, if you're a farmer and if your spouse does not work off farm, and many of them do, and many of them, that's how a farmer gets insurance, through a private business. Well, if you don't, that's why more than a few farmers have these policies. And that's why this is a big increase coming up if Congress doesn't work out a solution. But I think it's so significant that if the Republicans don't do something, they're going to pay at the polls in 2026. Republicans know that.
Okay, border reopening plan with Mexico next week. I think we touched on that a little
We
bit, but
touched
you
on
might have
that.
some
We
more.
touched on
Okay.
that. I don't know about next week. It could be next week. I just don't know the timeline, but they can announce it whenever they want. But as we pointed out, you're going to go through multiple steps in order to get the cattle back into the United States. And it's going to be phased in anyway. It's just not going to be all Mexican cattle. And as I said, they're going to have to go through 4 testing patterns, 3 in Mexico, 1 in the United States. So that tells me, at least from a trader perspective, it's not going to be overtly bearish because it's going to take a while. I think it's prudent that they're doing that way, because you got to be very cautious on this one. And it looks like if it goes the way that we've explained, that's a pretty cautious approach, and I think it's a needed approach.
And just talking about that, we haven't really seen much of that Argentine cattle come in. I mean, these markets have exploded higher here in feeder cattle. We're back to cash trading $10 higher than futures. The trend line in the bull market, because I do that video with Carrie Artek, we touched the major 5-year trend line, but we didn't break it. And the trend in cattle is still up if you're into long-term trading here. Speaking of cattle, and you could tell, Jim, that they're getting ready to do something, because the USDA has adjusted its website, and when they're getting ready to
can we show the banner they're putting up on the main on the main USDA website?
Is it
I saw that this week. Yep. President Trump is putting farmers first. See USDA's action since January the 20th, 2025. That happens to be Inauguration Day. Trump is putting American farmers first. Well, we're going to see. That's not what I'm hearing so far relative to some of the negative on the tariffs, but on this, what we call SDP, Supplemental Disaster Program, stage 2 or phase 2, Tommy. That was the biggest story I had to cover this week. I haven't had so many emails from farmers, crop insurance agents saying, what is USDA doing? It's not farmer friendly, by the way. I'd like to, I hope Trump hears about this, because they flipped the script on SDP 2. They're going to a spring price, not a harvest price. And that's significantly lowering the aid that farmers are going to get, the farmers who qualify. There's a lot of other steps that farmers have to go through in order to qualify. And it's gone up to Brooke Rollins, USDA secretary. She has heard the complaints. Now, I don't know whether they're going to change some of the things that they did, but Brooke Rollins knows that this is not going down well in farm country, at crop insurance companies and farm state lawmakers, bipartisan. They don't like the way someone or some officials in USDA have implemented what Congress pointed out. Now, I think we have a table that I can go through, Tommy.
Yeah, we got a lot of things there. I have to say, as far as Brooke Rollins in the news this week, she was a little quieter. I know she's out running around working hard and stuff, but I didn't see her name pop up as much in past weeks.
She's doing op-eds. She had one on Fox News. She had one on the Hill. I think she's going that way, and maybe she might just be on vacation. I got to check on that.
Okay, this is the chart. Total disaster rate.
Let's go through this, and I'll explain it. Okay. Remember, at December 21st last year, Congress authorized almost $21 billion in disaster aid. Now, as part of that SDRP, Supplemental Disaster Relief Program funding, was $16 billion, and almost $5 billion was block grants and for livestock. That's the ELRP. Now, the first part, SDRP 1, either phase 1 or stage 1, they released $5.8 billion of the $16 billion available. That means there's a little over $10 billion yet to be allocated. Farmer, because they had the factor. They had a 35% factor. Trust me, you SDR people, you're going to get a top-up payment, but it's going to be later rather than sooner, May or June, and it could be a hefty amount. Now, SDRP 2, that's where we have all the controversies. The expected payments are estimated at $2.7 billion, and then they had some on-farm storage of $45 million and milk loss of $1.65 million. Now, then we go to, I'd have to see, I don't see it. Let's see. There we go.
Storage.
The total, the remaining funding for SDRP top up, that supplemental payment on the top of the supplemental, is around $7.5 billion. This is why some farmers who got the $5.8 billion in Supplemental Disaster Relief Program 1 are saying, you mean we have to wait until May and June to get the top up? Yes. Why? Because the sign up for SDRP 2 ends April 30th. And it's complicated. It's a very complicated program. But what I found out again today is there are a lot of data problems in SDRP 2. Apparently, a lot of the numbers that farmers are telling them, these are not my numbers. These are not my production.
Oh, my.
And so USDA looked into it and the farmers were correct. So it's going to take a month or two probably for USDA to square that data, Tommy. So that is the reason I really think that this is going to come out later rather than sooner. And also Congress, I don't know whether they're going to legislate USDA to implement the SDRP2 program the way they thought was intended, and some USDA officials, and I put that in quote, interpreted the law far different than what Congress thought that they were legislating. So this is an issue that's going to linger, Tommy. Trust me.
Real quick, Jim, we have a lot of people listening to this podcast who may not understand what SDRP is. And
Supplemental Disaster Relief Program. S supplemental, D disaster, R for relief, P for program, SDRP.
Well, I'm glad you knew the answer to that. I'd be embarrassed if we didn't. All right, let's keep going here. We're getting towards the end, and we do have a couple other things to talk about that you didn't. I want to get to the Supreme Court at the end, but that's not here yet. Union Pacific Corpus poised.
Oh, they filed at least 7,000 pages.
7,000 pages?
7,000 pages. This is typical for a merger. Yes. Now, I didn't go through all of it, but I did put some of the highlights in today's update. So get on Tommy's site and look at, it's near the bottom under my transportation and logistics category on it, and you get some pros and cons. And this is not a showcase that it's going to be approved, and we're not going to have that approval or rejection until sometime into 2026, probably well into 2026. That's the bottom line, Tommy, that they had to justify. And of course, the two railroads that want to merge put their own spin on it, but I think it's worth reading on that one. It would be the first truly transcontinental railroad in the United States. This is potentially big news, but it's again later rather than sooner. But the clock is ticking now because they filed the information with the transportation, with the STB, Surface Transportation Board.
I got a few more things pop up, and then you said at the end you wanted to do a true lightning round, and I think you're just going to talk about things that you want to talk about. And you know why you could do that? Because it's your show, and we don't have to go on commercial break, and you're the man. All right, Kennedy Center will be renamed Trump Kennedy Center, White House says.
Yeah, here we go. That tells you, Trump is got on the board of directors. I think he's chairman of the board of directors of the Kennedy Center. And of course, the board of directors this week renamed the Kennedy Center,
Oh
the
boy.
Kennedy Trump Center. That's Trump 101. That's
Speaking
Trump.
on the Trump train,
Yeah.
dude, Trump takes action to somewhat ease marijuana restrictions.
Yes,
What's
and
going on?
this is a major story because he's changing the onerous category, the definition
Hmm.
of grass, if you will, marijuana, and so it's not going to have this the law coming down so harsh on marijuana, and this is going to affect all the marijuana industry. Like here, uh, Virginia, you have to have special doctor's permission. Now you can
Okay.
travel to Maryland, and they have open stores to get marijuana. I think this could impact those types of stores that you've seen in
Hmm.
Maryland, California, Colorado, in time. But bottom line, they Trump lessened the significant albatross on taking marijuana. There's a political overtone to this,
I think I have a
Tommy.
picture to apply to that.
Younger voters. Yeah, Trump doesn't smoke or drink, but this is a good graphic.
Who put that up there? And
Democrats
just
don't
like
like.
that, Democrats don't like weed anymore. Trump smoking a little something something he got from his buddy Snoop Dogg.
It's for medicinal purposes if he's
Yeah, it
doing
helps
it,
with
let
the
me tell
pain.
you. But he listened to the people who are saying, "Look, I take it for pain, and it's
Mhm.
helping me."
Yeah.
And I more than a few people have told me it helps them out medicinally, and they're not lying to me. These are older
Well,
people who
uh,
actually do it.
think of all the things you can go to the drugstore and get a script for that help with pain. Everyone knows if you smoke a little, take a little, eat a little, do whatever, it'll lessen the pain, and you
And
might eat a bag of Doritos in the meantime too. So that okay, I'm out of pictures. I'm out of pop-up headlines. I believe you wanted to go old school
well,
lightning round.
I don't have the list. Actually, frankly, I didn't have time, but we can go through. There were so many things that happened this week. We had California
Hmm.
gave an initial positive step of finally not authorizing, implementing E15 for ethanol out in the state of California. But I will put a dose of reality on this. CARB is the agency within California that has several more steps that have to be followed in order to get what I would say general implementation of the E15. This is a step in the right direction that it passed some requirements, Tommy, but I think we're going to be well into 2026 before we see the real positive nature of E15, year round E15 in California. Now, let's look at year round E15 in the United States. Remember, last December, as part of that budget reconciliation bill, I'm sorry, as part of the aid bill that we got the $10 billion in ECAP, the farmer aid program, and the near almost $21 billion in ag disaster, December 21st, 2024. Initially, there was in the legislation, uh, year round E15, but it was taken out at the very end. There is wide bipartisan support for year-round E15. So this is going to be attempted again, I think, in January in a must-pass bill. What
Okay.
Republicans tell me, Tommy, is they want President Trump to come out and support the legislative effort toward year-round E15. So if he does that, then you up your odds that this thing is going to pass Congress in a must-pass spending bill. Now, the administration can do it administratively, but it's far better to get this codified by Congress. So that, again, that's another thing we're going to see probably in January 2026. It's going to be a very important month for a number of things, including whether or not the all the Trump tax cuts, the equipment depreciation, the further tax cuts on taxes, somewhat Social Security, but not all, and some other aspects of the one big beautiful bill are going to come into play, which Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent keeps on saying we're going to have a gross domestic product for the United States of 4% or above If
Oh
that's
my.
if that's the case, you are going to hum, and that'll be very good news for all Americans, and it'll be good for the equity market. So I just hope, I don't care who's president, if they have a good package, let the economy go without inflation kicking off. So watch
Yeah.
that one.
All right.
Overall, we had a number of USDA officials and USDR and CFTC officials confirmed. So I think USDA has now 15 um, upper tier officials, undersecretary, deputy secretary, etc., now approved by the Senate. That just means Brooke Rollins doesn't have to do it all. Maybe this is why we're not hearing from her as much. She finally has a team in place, and that's for the good, because these people, if they follow the intent of the law, as opposed to not following it under like SDRP2, then she can go out and do what any ag secretary should do, Tommy: listen to farmers and ranchers of what their concerns are. And if you listen to them, that's the best way to bring it to the one person who can really help her, and that's President Trump. If he hears a problem, he usually addresses it one way or the other. That's another thing I wanted to talk
Mhm.
about. The labor. G.T. Thompson will eventually file his bill for year-round migrant workers, and that'll help the dairy industry. But they need a push again from President Trump on that. But Trump has some officials, including Stephen Miller. You can look him up,
Mhm.
Stephen Miller. He gets very conservative on allowing even seasonal workers into the United States. So if we can pass his hurdle, maybe we can get a more free flow of really needed labor workers for the dairy industry, especially the specialty crop producers. That
Sugar
brings,
beets.
yes, yeah, all those specialty crop producers. And that brings up another one, Tommy, on
Mhm.
specialty crops. USDA's $12 billion aid package includes $1 billion for specialty crops and sugar. It should be double that, at least double
Mhm.
that. And bipartisan, you had 100 lawmakers, both political parties, write to the administration saying, specialty crop producers and sugar were really impacted. I think we said last week a number of sugar beet growers were losing $300 to $400 an acre,
Per acre.
with some new sugar beet growers $700 to $800 an acre. That's total pain, Tommy. And this is another one. I talked a little bit on AgriTalk on this, but for those farmers, and there are, and I understand their position, they're saying, there's going to be some juncture at which we cannot count on all this aid. I agree with that. I would rather the lawmakers, farm state lawmakers, rather than work on a skinny Farm Bill 2, beef up again what they did in the one big beautiful bill under reference prices, because we've had the cost of production for agriculture since COVID go up around 30%. If you recall, the increase that was in the uh, one big beautiful bill signed July the 4th was a 10 to 20% increase in reference prices. So we need another kick up. Oh,
Mhm.
people will say this costs so much money. Here's your political angle. If we don't solidify the planting of major crops and all crops in the United States, that will eventually lead to either a concentration of acres to the big producers, to the big acreage producers, or fewer acres planted where farmers go out of business. And what country do you think would pick up the slack?
Brazil,
Brazil.
Argentina, someone.
Yes. And what would that mean to food prices? So, by helping the business of agriculture, you are tempering potential increases in the future of food prices. So that's a pretty good way to justify some of the income transfer assistance going to farmers. And I know more than a few say, we've got to learn to stand on our feet. I hear that, but you've had 2 to 3 years of lower prices, and too many farmers across the United States have eaten into their total equity. And just talk to an ag banker. And that's what this town is doing. Around 50% of all this farmer aid coming out, Tommy, is going to be used by farmers to pay down the debt. Yes, it can lead to somewhat of another boost in fertilizer prices. That's always the case when you have income transfers, that they get built in to a further appreciation of input prices. But let's hope Trump does other things to help the supply of fertilizer. But I wanted to get that through for a perspective on this sensitive issue of farmers' aid, because this aid is only covering 25 to 30% of farmers' losses. So that tells you this is not a bailout. Even if you got double that, it just, there's still, you need the marketplace to help you out. And that's where a combination of China buying, not just soybeans, but milo, sorghum, maybe beef, etc., and also the domestic utilization for programs that we talked about. So let's have a combo of both trade policy and domestic utilization of our two biggest commodities, corn and soybeans. Then you can say, maybe the future years will be a lot rosier. I'm not going to say golden era until we can really see it on the horizon. I don't like to predict a golden era until I see the glow starting. The glow is not starting, Tommy.
No. When they say golden era, I always say, what are you smoking out in agriculture? I just had to bring that one up one more time. Okay, last but not least, I got to reel you in. Supreme Court. When the hell are we going to hear from these men and women?
Any day now. It's either later within the next week or so, or early in 2026. And we're talking what we're waiting on for the Supreme Court. That's whether they're going to rule whether or not Trump's tariffs are constitutional. All those charges of the funds coming in, and I'll tell you, I've heard so many different scenarios from different lawyers, and I'm just going to wait now to see how the Supreme Court is going to rule. The majority of lawyers are news seems to think that they'll rule against the Trump administration. I'm not quite so sure. And it could be a split decision. It could be something like, then? It could be something like from this time forward. In other words, all the tariff money that's coming in keeps in that pool.
200
billion.
200 billion. Trillion, right.
Yeah. And the reason, Tommy, the reason why, see, Trump keeps on saying he did on the $12 billion farmer aid program, the bridge money, he said that was coming out of the tariff funding. It is not. 100%. He's incorrect. But he uses that rhetorically, and he does that over and over again. However, if they were to use those tariff funds, Congress, I think, would have to approve any such funding coming out of tariffs. That's above and beyond already legislation. That's the conundrum. Okay. So that's why it's going to be important, whenever this ruling comes, and what it says and how it says it. And again, we're going to pounce on that big time in a special report on your site, Tommy. We'll be there when that ruling comes out with the news plus analysis.
Very good. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to the American farmer, Jim? Because they could be watching this on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. This is going to come out Saturday, folks. The Wiesemeyer's Perspective is going to come out Saturday at 6 in the morning starting this week.
Yeah, well, record corn exports, we just need to get the price up. Soybeans are in a conundrum. As we said, 7-week lows, 27.5 cents down this week. But let's hope China continues to purchase U.S. soybeans, which I think they will, because it was a geopolitical agreement. Let's hope eventually that 10% fentanyl tariff comes off, then U.S. soybeans become competitive. Watch the payment rates next week. And we went through them, and they're nothing to sneeze at. This will help provide much needed initial cash flow that farmers need. And then we have the top-up payments coming out for the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, both Stage 1 and Stage 2. That won't come until May or June. But more aid is on its way, And then Congress is also going to debate whether or not to have an additional farmer aid package as part of the must-pass spending bill in January. They've asked USDA to tell them how much additional funding do you think is needed in farm country. Bottom line, the aid, multi-billion dollars in aid is coming out there. It is going to help cash flow. It is going to be able to have farmers pay down some of their debt, and but more is needed, and it looks like more is coming, Tommy. That's not a bad Christmas. Yeah, that's not a bad Christmas gift.
That's not bad. But yeah, lots to talk about. 2026 is going to be lit as long as Trump's president. The news cycle is going to be moving fast. You need to get some rest. This is the worst. You and I, we were like misclicking, mistalking, coughing. Your voice is strained. I think a nice beer would help that, Jim.
No, I got it to the left of me. It's going to start right when we get done. Negro Modelo, Mexico.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank
Viva la Mexico.
Well, there you go. Okay, I'll keep it there. Merry Christmas, Jim.
Merry Christmas.